What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another edition of 10 Minutes with Matt. We got new hand gestures this week, and today we're going to talk about what it takes to be an NBA contender. So what I did was I looked, into the past decade at the teams that made the NBA Finals, and I looked at their numbers, points scored per game, points allowed per game, looked at kind of their roster personnel, and what we're going to do is we're going to apply what I found to this season. And I know it's not a huge sample size. We're about 25 games in. But I think, it's enough to kind of determine which teams are on the right track and which teams, might have cause for concern going forward. So let's get started. The first thing that you need to make a deep playoff run, if you're behind in Mario Kart, is you need star power. And I'm talking about talent. And there was an era in the NBA where you needed three all-star caliber players. You go back to the Celtics, obviously, with kind of popularizing the big three, at least in my lifetime. Then you go to the Miami big three. The Spurs always had Duncan, Ginobili, Parker, and then Kawhi. And then that stretch where it was Cavs, Warriors every year, was three, and then KD joined Golden State and it became four. And what we've seen recently actually was kind of a lot more parity in the league, where you really only needed two all-stars when you talk about AD and LeBron. Now, obviously, LeBron is one of the best to ever play the game, so maybe he counts as 2.5 there with AD. But then the year before that, you look at Kawhi and Pascal. Kyle Lowry is an all-star, but I wouldn't really consider Kawhi, Pascal, and Kyle Lowry a big three per se. Not the same level of talent when you look at Steph, Clay, KD, and Draymond. Just not the same amount of talent. I think we can all agree on that. So, it goes without saying that you need talent to win the NBA Finals, but we're going to put it out there that we'll say you need at least two all-stars, and that gets rid of, your Pistons, your Thunder, even teams like Memphis and Charlotte who, are up and coming, don't yet have that talent, whether they sign a free agent or, develop some of their guys into all-stars. Remains to be seen, but right now it's not going to happen. And you didn't come here to hear me talk about how the Hornets aren't going to make the finals. You already know that. But moving forward, and this is actually going to narrow it down more than you would think, something that almost all the teams that made the NBA Finals, what they did was they ranked top 15 in offense, points scored per game, and top 20 in defense, points allowed, per game. And that's not really asking a lot when you think about it. You just have to be in the top half in points scored and be in the top 2/3 in points allowed. The only exception was the 2017-2018 Cavs, who, were in the bottom 5 in defense, and that was coincidentally the year they also got swept by the Warriors. So, you got to be able to perform on both ends of the floor. Now, some of the potential exceptions, the Brooklyn Nets, now they obviously have the star power. Not only do they have three all-star caliber players, they have two former MVPs and a guy in Kyrie Irving that has made huge shots in the NBA Finals, has a ton of playoff experience and a ton of all-star nods to his name already. But they're bottom 5 in defense right now. And obviously have even more concerns when you look at depth, when you look at size, and we'll see. I imagine they'll be pretty aggressive, going into the trade deadline to try and address some of those issues. But right now, a team hasn't won the NBA Finals being, in the bottom 10 in defense. Whether they can be an exception remains to be seen. But another team that might be concerned right now, you look at the Boston Celtics, not top 15 in offense. Same goes for the Miami Heat. Same goes for the Phoenix Suns. And that's a problem because no team has ever, in the past decade, made the NBA Finals without being top 15 in offense. Dallas Mavericks obviously have been struggling. They're neither top 15 or top 20. And so, look for those teams to hopefully either address those issues during the trade deadline. Maybe they change up their rotations. But definitely a problem for certain squads right now. Moving forward, so that leaves actually 9 teams that have the star power, ranked top 15 offense, top 20 in defense. It's only 9. And of those 9, we're going to find only 4 have the next thing, and that is a star wing player. And what I'm talking about LeBron, KD, Kawhi. Utah is like kind of Donovan Mitchell, kind of fits that. Those are your 4 teams that will eventually be left with after this. Because what we've seen is that if you're a team whose primary scorer is your point guard or your center, you're probably not going to make the NBA Finals. You know, if you look at Chris Paul in New Orleans, in Los Angeles, you look at Derrick Rose in his MVP years in Chicago, you look at Damian Lillard in Portland, even Russell Westbrook in OKC, it hasn't happened. And now we have these kind of crazy, playmaking centers in Jokic and Embiid, whether they can make the NBA Finals. Not sure if they have the team around them yet. Sixers and, Nuggets haven't looked great. Sixers have. And whether that will translate to the playoffs, we don't know yet. But it hasn't happened. When you think about the centers that have started in the NBA Finals, it's kind of ridiculous, especially those Cavs Warriors, years where you had Zaza Pachulia, you had Andrew Bogut, who, had some value, but let's be honest, Andrew Bogut's, no, you're not going to, set your whole defense around Andrew Bogut coming at you. Anderson Varejao, Tristan Thompson. Anyone remember Thiago Splitter? He started in the NBA Finals. They pushed Tim Duncan to the power forward. We had Thiago Splitter, whose claim to fame was basically ending up on the wrong side of highlight reels when LeBron was either dunking on him or blocking him. And so, it kind of goes to show you don't usually need a great center. And a lot of those teams, when they had kind of a star big guy, they moved him to the power forward and put some size out there. Whether that, remains kind of the precedent, we'll see. Even with more modern examples like Trae Young, we'll see. We'll have to track him, in Atlanta and whether they can develop talent around him. But if he's always going to become their primary scorer at the point guard, history's not exactly on his side there. So that leaves 4 teams. Clippers, Lakers, Bucks, Jazz, that fit all of that criteria. And there's one more thing that you're going to need, and that is a vocal leader. Now that's not easily quantifiable, but you look at LeBron does a ton on the floor, also does a ton off the floor. He's a leader. He's a guy that's cerebral. It's not just about, physical prowess, which he obviously has. It's also an X and O's game. It's understanding other teams' defenses. And when you're in the playoffs, it's not like the regular season where you see a team once in the COVID era. Now it's twice in the same week. In the playoffs, you get to play them, night after night, and you really get to kind of break down what works and what doesn't. And so for that, you really need a guy that understands other teams, other players. And, these guys really, really rare to have someone that can lead in the locker room. When you look at the bubble, obviously put a ton of pressure on these guys mentally and physically. And you look at which teams broke down. You saw the Clippers break down. You saw Utah. Both teams blew 3-1 leads to the Nuggets. You saw, Boston had some locker room issues during that time. And the Lakers and the Heat came out on top because they had a guy in Jimmy Butler who's, a vocal leader, a guy who, sets an example, pushes his teammates, and understands the game of basketball. And on the other side, you have LeBron James. Previously, Kyle Lowry was kind of that guy in Toronto because Kawhi is not as vocal. And so, it's more than just roster personnel. It's more than just talent. It's more than offense and defense. You need that guy. And so that really, the Clippers, Jazz, and Bucks have yet to establish that vocal leader, that guy that's going to push his teammates in the playoffs. So that leaves the Lakers right now. I'm not a huge Laker guy. They fit the bill. I don't think that surprises anyone. But at the end of the day, they're set up to win a finals, and that's by design. We'll see if anyone can challenge them with, about 40, 45 games left in the season. Thanks for watching. This has been 10 Minutes with Matt.